Welcome to Cute Widgets and More. In today's episode, we will answer a very simple question, namely, how do you draw a box around a piece of text as tight as possible without any of the text sticking outside of the box? You might think that is simple, but this is likely the hardest problem I've solved to date in this series. It actually all started in the production of the video series Programming with Cute Widgets, where I'm recording a large part of our Programming with Cute Widgets training material. And I just, a few days ago, in my timeline at least, got to the part where I'm telling about painting, and I'm telling about how do you know about the width of the text to be painted. In my early days, the answer was simple. Go to QFontMetrics, which is the metrics about the font, and ask for the width. That's a name that's easy to remember. But let me just show you some code compiled with Qt 5.15 that calls that exact method. See up here, QFontMetrics width of ABC to tell me how wide is that. And as you can see here, it says, well, let's see down here, warning, QFontMetrics width is deprecated. Instead, use horizontalAdvance. And if you try this code in a Qt 6, it won't even compile because in Qt 6 they threw away that code altogether. After recording that episode on painting and recording this episode here, I, for at least a few months, will remember that the API is called horizontalAdvance, but it's not something that rolls off my tongue. Width, that sounds like I want to know how wide this text is. Width with a Q string, there you are. There is, however, another problem. The problem is that when I tried it, I got something as you'll see here on the screen now. And please do ignore all this text up there. Are you done reading it? I said ignore it. Don't read that text. It's written there so when you revisit this piece of code in a year that you can remember what it was about. Here, I am now drawing the text that we have up here, FOX for example. I am drawing that both normal and italic. I'm drawing it italic, and you can also see I'm drawing the box that QFontMetrics horizontalAdvance, it says advance here, it's supposed to say horizontalAdvance. What the QFontMetrics horizontalAdvance gives me, that's the box here. And as you can see, it's a bit outside here and a bit outside there. Thank you very much for a piece of bad advice. Okay, let's see what horizontalAdvance really returns. Going to the documentation for QFontMetrics. In the code, if you look at that, you'll see that I'm using QFontMetrics F throughout. That's the floating point version of QFontMetrics, but it's giving me the same result. I tried both of them just to see if anything changed depending on that. QFontMetrics horizontalAdvance returns the horizontalAdvance in pixels, good, of the first length characters of text. Okay, so I specify a length here that is, I want the first 3 characters of this very long text. And how long is that? That's fair enough. That's nothing alarming so far. And please do hold your fingers ready on the pause key so you can read the whole text if you want to while I speak, so you don't read while I speak. Thank you. And then it continues on saying the entire length, this is a distance appropriate for drawing a subsequent character after text. So it's not the whole text. If we scroll down here, we can see there is another version of horizontalAdvance, this one just for a single character. And you can see there's some nice painting here. And what really is happening is that if I was to draw an italic F with an italic O next to it, then it would look weird if that O was all the way down to the white area here. The O can sneak in under the ascent, no, that's not the word, the right bearing of the letter F. And the right bearing, that's this area that we have here, and here's the left bearing where it can also sneak in. So what you see in my painting code over here is actually the O can start underneath this part here, and the other O can sneak in on the F at this part. That's exactly the bearings that we see there. So that's okay, and that's a good advice if what you want to do is to call QPainting code multiple times, draw a bit of text, draw some other text. I can't see the use case for that though, but hey, that's cool. But if all you want to know is the width of the text entirely, then this is not the API. So the width method likely shouldn't have pointed to this one. Actually, I don't know what it should have pointed to, but this is definitely not the right answer for that problem. And just a note here, I didn't bother looking at a Qt 5 dot something before 15 and seeing what the width method actually did. I did look in the source code for Qt 5.15 and saw that width there actually just called the horizontalAdvance. On this page for horizontalAdvance, there is a link saying see also boundingRect, which made me go, ah yeah, I've seen boundingRect API multiple places in Qt. For example, QPainter path. That's a number of constructs put together into one painter path object, and you can go to the painter path and say, give me the boundingRects, and boundingRect is then a rectangle that is drawn over all those pixels that are painted. Usually the boundingRect starts at the topmost leftmost corner down to the rightmost bottommost corner, and a rectangle is in there, right? boundingRect. That must be the answer. But unfortunately, let me show you the code. Before I show you the code, let me just show you what we see on the screen. And you'll notice that it says, and let me just go back here, one example here, it says 0, 0 and 0, 0. How can there be two 0 zeros in my coordinate system? And isn't that, by the way, up here? Well, I do a small trick called translate on the painter, which changes what 0, 0 is. So I translate, so this is 0, 0, then I can paint this thing. And I translate, so this is 0, 0, and I translate, paint the same thing again, which basically gives me that some very nice code to work with. Okay, let's look at this example over here. So what I asked for is my QFontMetrics : boundingRect, and the rectangle I got back was this red one here. Notice that it's above the 0, 0, so it's actually a -2, -12. What kind of boundingRect is that? The size seems okay to, at least if I took this F and dragged it a bit in, but it's also outside of this. That's what is going on. That's at least my thought. Let me just show you the code, because I know that you're anxious to see the code. I'm not going to show you the whole code. Actually, I'll record a separate episode where I walk through this code here. But here is the code. It has a mode, and we're now in the boundingRect mode. I get the boundingRect out of my FM, which is FontMetrics for the given font. I draw the boundary. That's what we do up here. I first set a red one, and I draw exactly what I got out of it. And then I set the pen to be green. And I draw a rectangle, this time at position 0, 0, and then with the width and height. So this is the green one, position 0, 0, and with the width and height, so that you can see what does it look like. Where would I have expected that character to show up? And then I draw the actual text here. That's the text inside the rectangle that was returned by my boundingRect. So 2 bad advices in one day. First, try and use horizontalAdvance. Was not wide enough. Try using boundingRect. That one was too weird, just at a weird place. But maybe it was just something I didn't understand. So let's try and just take that rectangle and move it down into the position where I expect it. So basically, take the rectangle here, take this point and move it down there, or basically translate by 2,12. That will move it 2 to the right and 12 down, and it looks like this. Now the rectangle sits down there, and it looks almost correct if it wasn't because that I now have it a bit to the left here. Okay, it was time for me to go back and reread the documentation a nth time. By now I've read QFontMetrics from one end to the other quite a few times, but I went back and I looked at that image that we have here on the screen, the one with the horizontalAdvance in here, and I realized the thing that sticks out there is the leftBerring. That's the part that we can overlap, and there might have been some rightBerring sticking out at the top there. And also, it told me somewhere, I can't find it right now, that it's actually telling me that there is a thing. Sorry, go up here. There's a thing called ascent. And the ascent of a font is the distance from the baseline to the highest position characters extend to. So maybe the point that was returned to me was the ascent. So let me try and translate. Again, I went back to my code here. This was the starting point. I said, maybe this distance here is the leftBerring, and maybe this up here is the ascent. So let me try and translate by the ascent, comma, the leftBerring, comma, the ascent. And that's what we see here. You didn't see the difference? Okay, well, I am going between step 3 and step 4. Step 3 were the one where I was just translating down, and step 4 was the one where I was translating by ascent. And so maybe indeed this was the leftBerring and ascent that I had there, because when I translated in with leftBerring and ascent, it looked good, except that it is still cut off. Back to the documentation once again. QFontMetrics boundingRect. That's where it all started for me. QFontMetrics is the information about fonts, so it should be the class that tell me this information. But reading on, I found that there's also a QPainter boundingRect. Okay, let's have a look at that one. Hopefully that will give me some information. Return the boundingRect of the text as it will appear when drawn inside the given rectangle. So you call it with this rectangle here, some flags, that's whether it should be left aligned or clipped or other flags there, and the text that you want to draw. And then it will return you the rectangle that it will be fitting in. So how about if I just give it no rectangle? Maybe that will, I can't even see what the purpose of that rectangle should be. But anyway, let me try and call boundingRect with an empty rectangle, no flags, and the string that I want to paint. And of course my font should be set up properly with italic and so on. And that now looks like this. So QPainter's boundingRect, that's what we have here. You can see, yes, it changes a wee bit on how wide it is. The height is the same, but still we have the problem of the font being outside of the boundingRect down here. Didn't we fix that bug last month? And now it reappeared? Have you heard your boss say that? Well, if that's the case, maybe, just maybe, you're not testing your software thoroughly enough. One of those solutions for testing is called Squish. It's a black box testing tool, and the cool thing about that is that we can help you there too, both with training and setting up your basic test infrastructure. I would rather like to put out an episode in Qt Videos and more that gives you a practical advice than just not put anything out because I didn't understand everything to the very bottom of the world. Which is why the next part was actually my final part until I got a bit further on. And the final idea was, why not just move the F a wee bit to the right, then it'll fit inside the box and make the box slightly bigger. And maybe in a real world example, I would be looking for, am I drawing italic in the first place? And if not, then I don't have a problem with seeing it. But if I am drawing italic, then I should check whether the first letter is an F or a J. And as you can see, I have this lining it up here, so I can basically go through each of the letter. And I think that F and J were the only ones that had a problem to start with. So I could have gone through that. And of course, if I have complete different letters, it might be a problem in that. But at least I could just add a bit of space. And that's exactly what I did here. And now you're going, oh my God, Jesper, you're wasting like, what is that, 60 pixels. Yes, it's 60 pixels on your screen right now because I've zoomed in by a factor of 20. Each of these boxes in reality is just 1 pixel. So it's 1, 2, and almost 3 pixels that you would be wasted. Would you have seen that on your high DPI screen? Likely not. Would you have seen it flow over down here? Maybe, depending on whether it was drawn on the very edge of things. But in any case, this is at least the solution to it. And let me just show you the code over here. I go to the Painter, ask for its boundary box, and then I adjust that boundary box with these 4 numbers here, X, Y, width, and height. X, Y, left, top, right, bottom. So I extend the right by 4 pixels. And then when I draw my text, I take my box and I translate it to 2,0. So take the whole area that I paint into, take that 2 pixels to the right, and that is what I'll be drawing. A solution, not a perfect solution, but sometimes the world needs to move on. But fortunately, I got a bit more of insight. But before I show you the insight, I also tried with tightBoundingRect, because QFontMetrics both have a boundingRect and a tightBoundingRect. And yes, you can see the boxes are smaller now than they were in the boundingRect we had here. This is the boundingRect. They are definitely smaller here than they were in the other one. Okay, it's tighter, but it's still outside, so how is that gonna help me? And I continued on looking in the documentation. And I read it for the nth time this time. I was reading the boundingRect method here, and it tells me that the function tells you where drawText function will draw when given the same arguments. So I've given a boundingRect here and drawText, and just for the fun of it, I of course knew what I would get to. I would get to QPainter, drawText, and there's this drawText method that takes a rectangle, and that fits well because let's just go back here. Let's just go back to the QPainter version. That's this one here. QPainter boundingRect. So that one was not the one giving me the weird off by whatever boundingRect. So that one, here we are, gave me a somewhat okay boundingRect. So obviously taking this rectangle, and it would be calling drawText, which is cool, except that it's pointing me now to the drawText that takes a point, not the one taking a rectangle, which makes no sense whatsoever. But that made me wonder, how about the other one? The one that is off, that is very much off, this one up here. How about if that one returns me 2 things? And let me just take you back in time. In the days when this code was written, it was a stormy November night. Can we get some sound effects, please? In the office in Oslo, some Trolltech guy was sitting there, and he thought to himself, the boundingRect method needs to return 2 things: a point for the baseline, the point that I would give to my QPainter draw text, the one taking a point, not the one taking a rect, and a size. And let me see, what do I have? Point and size. Oh yeah, I have a QRect. So he put those into a QRect. The rest of the world for eternity, and Google it. You'll find lots of places on Stack Overflow where people are wondering about this exact problem. But the rest of the world, they thought of this rectangle as being a rectangle that things would be fitting into. But that's not what he returned to you. He should have returned a new struct, not a QRect, but a struct with a Q point baseline offset and a Q size box size. Box size, that's perfectly okay, we saw that. But the Q point returned is the Q point given to QPainter : draw text, the version taking a Q point, not the one taking a Q rect. And if I give it to that version now, ta-da! This is the one where they fit perfectly inside. And here you can see the position given there. And F and J, and they all fit perfectly inside. And the tight version of boundingRect also fits perfectly inside. All I need to realize is that it's not the draw, it's not the QPainter draw rect, no, QPainter draw text taking a rectangle and the text, it's a QPainter draw text taking a Q point from the boundingRect's position and the text. And as this, and this is the note up says here, the only problem left is I will never remember this. So maybe you should be putting a breakpoint or put a bookmark on this particular place in Qt Widgets and More YouTube, so that you can get back once you need to draw something with a draw text column. Let me just show you the code over here so you can see that I am indeed doing the right thing using Point API. So I go to the boundingRect of my QFontMetrics here for this text. My rectangle is 0, 0, boundingRect width, boundingRect height. I draw the boundary box as I've done before. It looks perfectly okay. I draw the text, this time with the one taking a Q point, not the one taking a QRect. I need to write minus boundingRect at top left, which makes me wonder, am I completely wrong in all of this? By all means, if you have more insight than me, do let me know in a comment or send me an email or something so that I can be educated on that. But otherwise, draw text at minus boundingRect dot top left. That puts it right inside that box. That's it for this episode of Qt Widgets and More. If you have any insight beyond what I have shared here, maybe you are the guy sitting there in Trolltech in Oslo, a cold November night, and have more insight into this, by all means do let me know. Otherwise, do read the comments below. Somebody might add more details to this. We'll see shortly again. The next episode, I will walk you through the code that is shown here. This is not a trivial hello world drawing. It's not complex, super complex either, but it's more complex than at least what will be shown in a standard training. So come back next episode and I'll show you how I did all of this. There's a lot of coordinate transformations and other neat tricks in there. And until next time, have a great time.